Hi, welcome back to Lady Loves Dead Reads. My name is Jessica, and in today's video, I'm going to be recommending some books to you that have helped me change my life. A quick note on how I'm going to film this. I started a new kind of filming procedure for myself in July when I was filming my wrap-ups, because it's really hard for me and my schedule and my neurodivergent brain and with my health issues to sit down and film a really long sit-down video all in one take. It works a lot better for me if I can do it in small chunks throughout the week or however long it takes. So that is how I will be filming this video. I'll do my intro here, and then I'll probably do each book I'm recommending in a separate take. I apologize if that feels disruptive for you. It is just what works best for me. I wanted to create a book series of recommendations about books that I've read to change my life. I have gone through a lot of major life changes since about 2022, and I had some low lows, and one of the ways that I was able to pull myself out of those lows and out of the funks and make some really positive steps forward is through reading books. That is what I do. Being an academic, being a reader, whenever I'm faced with a problem, the first step that I take to solve it is going into heavy research and reading about it and learning about how to solve the problem instead of just making a snap decision on things. So I've really heavily relied on reading throughout my whole life, but especially in the past few years, to help me make some positive and pretty big impactful changes in my life. And I want to share those books with you and share how I use them in case they might also potentially make an impact on your life. I'm going to do 5 books per video installment so that I can give myself a good amount of time to talk about each book and share how I used it, what parts of it were helpful for me in making changes in my life, so on and so forth. They're books that could be traditional self-help books, but sometimes they're just general nonfiction. Sometimes they're actually works of fiction. It's a wide variety of books that have made an impact on me, and I want to be able to give myself a good amount of time for each book to be able to share what that impact was. So without further ado, let's get started with the first 5. The first book is The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind, and Body in the Healing of Trauma by Bessel, VanderKolk. This was published in 2014. It basically documents Dr. VanderKolk's history of treating trauma from the start of his career up to now, and all the things that he has learned about trauma and the work that he's done in trauma. And it is kind of a groundbreaking work about how mental and emotional trauma stays in your body and in your nervous system, and the research that he has done to learn about the best ways to treat it, and the outcomes that these different treatment methods have, and that kind of a thing. Now, this book is pretty academic. It isn't a self-help book. It's a more academic look at his career and what he has learned in his research about trauma. So if you're looking for something that's self-helpy, I probably wouldn't recommend this, but I do think this is a really good one to start with if you are trying to heal trauma, because it gets into that evidence-based practices, like the things that actually work, the science of it. And I feel like when you know the science behind a function going on in your brain and your body, you're much more capable of handling it, treating it, doing what you need to do to improve whatever's going on in your brain and your body. And this will give you like the scientific evidence-based foundation of what trauma is, how it happens, what are the results, what are the different kinds, what are the different ways it impacts you socially, emotionally, physically, all of that. And this really has helped me understand my own trauma and the ways that I feel it cycling through my nervous system to this day. And it got me on the right path to figuring out strategies and treatment methods that will actually work to treat the root of the trauma rather than be a band-aid for the symptoms. The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. The caveat with this one is that this is a Christian-based book. And this is about what the title says, trying to get out of a state of constant hurry and constant rushing. And the author talks a lot about how the rushing around and living in a constant fast-paced environment creates unnecessary stress, how it is imposed upon us by capitalist systems that aren't healthy for the humankind in the long run. And that one of the biggest acts of resistance that we can do is to move through life slowly and with God's peace. Now, if you're not a Christian, this probably isn't the book for you. He does pull from scripture quite a lot. He relies on Christian theology to back up a lot of the points that he makes. But for me, this was one of my best books of 2023. And it really has helped me to make positive changes in my life, reframing my stress and anxiety from leaning into the stress and really riding the adrenaline that I get into reacting differently to the surges of adrenaline and anxiety that I get. I am someone who very easily functions on adrenaline, and that's how I'm super productive and get lots of things done. And for the longest time, that has been how I've survived in the world, and that has been how I've coped with anxiety and uncertainty. And I'm trying to change that because I recognize that it's not healthy, that it makes me absolutely miserable, that it leads to really severe burnout. And this book is helping me to reframe at a spiritual level ways to slow down my pace, to stop functioning on adrenaline all the time, and to be just more mindful and present in my life. Next, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. Now, I know that a lot of the books on my list here get some pretty heavy criticism. I think Stephen Covey is pretty heavily criticized, particularly for this educational program that's happening in school systems across the United States called the Leader in Me program. And it's essentially where schools will pay out a bunch of money and adopt a method of teaching students these 7 habits. And then they get called, Leader in Me, Lighthouse schools and things like that. So there's been a lot of controversy around the ways in which Stephen Covey does sort of profit off of his work. And I honestly don't know if he's even still alive or if it is his family or his organization that continues to push the 7 habits and the Leader in Me program and things like that. So what was the other one that I talked about? Oh, The Body Keeps a Score. I mean, I've seen a lot of criticism about Bessel VanderKolk and him being problematic in a lot of ways. And this is one of those instances where you do sort of have to decide for yourself if those controversies and criticisms are something that affect you in a way that these should not be books that you pick up, because that is absolutely valid. For me, I read the books before I learned anything about the controversies. And so I read the books and applied them to my life, and they were really helpful. And so because I did that before I had any sort of, cancel culture colored glasses on, I was able to take away a lot of good things from the books themselves. And I'm not saying that cancel culture is a bad thing. I think there's a lot of merit to not supporting people when they behave badly. I also think there's room for growth in individuals. Obviously, that's what the whole video series is kind of about, is using literature for personal growth. So I wouldn't be making a video series on that if I didn't think people were capable of growth and change. And so my approach, I guess, when it comes to these kinds of controversies is just to remember that every single one of us is a human being and we all make a lot of mistakes. And where I draw the line with authors is when they just double down on their problematicness, like J.K. Rowling. Instead of being open to hearing about how her behavior harms others, she just doubles down on her position that harms others. So that for me is kind of like where I draw the line. I don't know Bessel VanderKolk personally. I don't know Stephen Covey personally. Haven't done a whole lot of research to see, like, have they taken ownership of the whatever they've done, right? You know, I haven't. And it's because, like I said, I read these books before I even knew that there was controversy surrounding the authors. So just keep that in mind and know that, like, I hear you. If you do not want to read one of these books because of some of those issues, that's completely valid, and you have every right to not do that. You have every right to take issue with the authors or with the material. I am sharing, like every influencer always says, I am sharing what worked for me and how it worked for me. And that's where it ends for what I'm trying to express. It's just, what are the books that helped me change my life and how did they do that? And then it's up to you how you use that information. I take absolutely no offense if you don't read any of these books at all. I don't care. I don't care if you don't read them. If you do read them and you love them, great. I hope you get something useful out of them, and maybe they help you make a better life for yourself. And if that happens, that's great too. Like, I have no attachment to how you may or may not use these books, okay? I am sharing them because they have helped me. And if on the off chance by me sharing it, it helps just one person, then it was worth sharing. With that said, let's talk about the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So this is basically a way to understand what you want in your life, who you want to be, and then gives you some direction on how to prioritize that and build your life around your values, and really knowing who you are and what you value, not what your parents value, not what your school systems value, but like what are your values, and then living from the place of those values. And it does walk you through, like it says, these 7 steps. So let me see if I can outline the 7 steps for you. So first he talks about paradigms and principles, and about how important it is that we understand how we view the world, and we understand what we think about ourselves and our place in the world, and what we think about what's right and wrong, who we want to be, and how we want to show up in our lives based on those values, essentially. So the first habit is being proactive. It's all about doing a little bit of advanced planning around how you are going to use your most precious resource, which is your time. So being proactive looks at how do you spend your time, and is the way you're spending your time in line not only with your goals but with your values, and are your goals in line with your values. Habit 2 is begin with the end in mind. So in order to be proactive, you first need to know like where you're heading to. And this book is very heavy on goal setting and then working toward a goal. So it's really walking you through steps on how to set effective goals, but also on how to actually live out your plans in meeting those goals. Buttershaw again. I guess he likes this book. So begin with the end in mind is all about thinking, okay, what is it that you are working toward? Like, what's the destination you're trying to direct your path toward? Habit 3 is putting first things first. So this is prioritizing, like deciding what is most important, what is most urgent, and figuring out, you know, how to prioritize what you need to do in order of urgency, importance, so on and so forth. Habit 4 is think win-win. So he gets into a little bit of how to cope and deal with other people and how to resolve conflict. So the think win-win is all about working with other people in a way where both parties get something positive, or both parties have a winning outcome, instead of a compromise and instead of like a win-lose and that kind of thing. And I think a lot of these principles in this book are so commonly known that some of it just feels like common sense anymore, but they did kind of originate with Stephen Covey. Habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And that's exactly what it sounds like. So in order to effectively communicate with someone, you need to understand who they are. You need to understand what it is they're trying to say. And then you think about, based on that, how can you most effectively express whatever you need to express in the situation in a way that's most helpful and kind. And seeking first to understand then be understood also has a bit of a problem solving element in it too, in that, you know, before you make a decision, before you decide on a way to solve a problem, you need to first understand like what the problem is, what is the situation, and get enough of the information as you can to be able to make the best decision in that particular situation. Synergize is all about building on each other's strengths when you're working within a team, seeing what everybody's good at, and trying to create a team where everybody gets to do a role that matches their strengths, and synergizing each other's talents together so that they play off each other. And so that chapter has a lot to do with like team building and leadership and that kind of thing. And then habit number 7 is sharpen the saw. And sharpen the saw basically says that you have to go through these 7 steps in a cyclical way. And because you as a person grow and evolve, and as you grow and evolve and as you learn, your values might change. And when your values change, your goals might change. And when your goals change, your plans change. And so sharpen the saw is all about like making sure to take time to renew yourself, take time to rest, take time to reflect, engage in whatever your spiritual life is, and just kind of recalibrate and make sure that, you know, you're still living in line with what you want to do, who you want to be, and where you want to go. And I have used all of the principles in this book. I consistently continue to use all of the principles in this book for goal setting. My ultimate flaw as a goal setter, though, is I will be halfway to a goal and then decide, you know, it's really not that important. And I mean, it's about the journey. It's not about the end, right? It's not about the destination. It's about what you learn in the process. So it's not a waste that I've done that a lot, but I've done that a lot. Next, we have Boundaries by Henry Cloud and John Townsend. This is another book where I think there's probably some people out there who don't like it or have found problems with it or with the authors. I don't really know. Again, I read it and found value in it for my own life. Now, this one also is from a Christian perspective. Again, as I've said before, probably in this video as well, your faith walk is yours. I don't judge. I don't condemn. I embrace every possible concept of God or concept of there being no God. It does not bother me one iota what faith system or lack of faith system you practice. You're welcome here regardless. You don't have to agree with me. You don't have to align with me. But for me, this was extremely helpful in learning how to set boundaries. I did not have a good grasp on what boundaries really meant prior to reading this book. A lot of the ways that I had been taught about boundaries was more about controlling other people rather than controlling yourself. And so this book talks a lot about how your boundaries are you deciding how you are going to react to certain behaviors based on what you value and what you need as a person within those spaces and within those relationships. And you are going to take the other person into consideration. You do take the situation as a whole into consideration, but you also take yourself into consideration. And so this is a really good book for people who maybe were raised to be people pleasers and to just be a doormat and let people walk all over them, which I was, especially when I was younger. And learning how to set healthy, kind boundaries is something that this book has really helped me with. Because once I understood the importance of boundaries, I kind of became the person that was so firm in them that it got a little aggressive and probably unhealthy. But this helped me kind of pull back a little and know how to set boundaries that are still kind to everyone involved in whatever the situation is. Not that I'm perfect about it, like I'm still making mistakes right and left as everyone does because we're human. But this gives me some guideposts to follow on ways to set boundaries that are healthy. And it talks about not only boundaries with other people, but boundaries within ourselves. And that kind of, to me, gets into the concept of reparenting and learning how to parent yourself if you didn't have someone parenting you, basically. Like the concept of learning how to set loving boundaries with yourself when you were in the role of being a parent instead of being a child. That has been really helpful for me as well, learning how to have a little bit more self-discipline, not from a punitive place, but from a place of, this isn't good for you, we're not going to do it anymore, kind of a thing. So you set boundaries with your thoughts, you set boundaries with your behaviors, with your time, and then you're also setting boundaries with other people and institutions. And it just kind of talks about, those different levels of boundaries that you can set. And it gives examples, and it also provides examples from the Bible and scripture. And that, I think, a lot of times is what drives non-Christians away from this book. And that's okay. If that's not for you, it's not for you. That's what I took out of it and how it's helped me with my life. And so if this is something that's interesting to you from what I've said, definitely give it a try and see if it helps. If it doesn't help, that's okay. There's other books out there about boundaries, which I'm sure are equally as wonderful. This is just the first one that I found and read, and that really helped me to make some changes in my own thoughts and behavior. The Perfectionist Guide to Losing Control, A Path to Peace and Freedom by Kathering Schafler. When I read this book, I thought it was going to be a book about how to get rid of your perfectionism, but it actually turned out to be something way better than that. Kathering Schafler is a mental health therapist. She's a licensed mental health practitioner, and she draws on her experience working with clients to write this book. She breaks up perfectionism into 4 different categories. I don't know if it's 4, but into several different types of perfectionism, which I didn't totally like or agree with, because I think that they interact and I was pieces of every type. I don't think that categorization worked very well. The overall messaging about perfectionism was excellent. So she talks about how we don't need to get rid of perfectionism, because perfectionism is just part of who we are. But what we do need to do is practice adaptive rather than maladaptive perfectionism. So it's about embracing the parts of perfectionism that can be a strength and a tool for your life, and healing the parts that are destructive. So parts of perfectionism that are destructive would be things like punishing yourself if you don't meet a goal, focusing on the end goal rather than enjoying the process, always being future thinking instead of living in the moment. Suicidal ideation is a really common problem with perfectionism. And then she talks about ways that we can work through some of this and heal those parts that are more maladaptive or harmful. What I found most helpful from this book was her emphasis on mindfulness and enjoying the small pleasures in life, and how when we bring our focus and our awareness to the small pleasures and the good things and the joy in the journey, that it starts to create neural pathways in our brain, so that those are the things we recognize more often and see more often, because our lives are what we pay attention to. And so if we want to live well-rounded, beautiful lives, we need to make sure that we're paying attention to the present moment and experiencing it and enjoying all of the small pleasures that the present moment brings us, like a warm cup of coffee or the feel of a hot shower after a long day, and really leaning into those pleasures and how healing that can be for someone who is always sort of goal-oriented or future-oriented. That, I think, was my biggest takeaway, was about how pleasure can be a healing practice, how we can shape our view of the world by what we give our attention to. And when we intentionally give our attention to some of the things that are pleasurable or pleasant or that make us happy or bring us joy, we're going to create neural pathways so that we more often see and notice those things in the future. I gave this book 4 stars because one of the things that she doesn't do, and she acknowledges that she doesn't do this, she doesn't talk about things like systemic racism. She doesn't talk about neurodivergence, all kinds of different things that really play into why people develop perfectionist tendencies or perfectionist personality types. And the rationale was that the book would have been too long, but I'm like, okay, so write a longer book. like write the definitive book. I wish that she had covered those topics, and I think that more people would get more out of it if she had done that. All right, y'all, that will do it for the first episode of books I've read to improve my life. I think moving forward with this series, I'm going to share just any book that I've read with that purpose, even if there were books that I didn't like and that didn't work for me. So that maybe if you're thinking of picking those books up, it might save you some time and you won't pick them up, kind of thing. This video, this first one, focused primarily on books that made a positive impact on me and that were definitely helpful. But I think it would be helpful for you as readers to know the ones that were also not helpful for me and why. So I'll continue doing this series, and I'll just include any of the books that I read for the purpose of like self-improvement or learning or improving my life in some way, whether I like them or not. And hopefully this video helps some of you, even just one person. That would be awesome. Like I said in one of the clips here, I understand that some of these books have some controversy around them, and you absolutely can make your own choices about whether or not to read them. I'm not pushing them in one way or another. I'm just literally just sharing how they helped me. So have you read any of these? Let me know down below. Do you have recommendations for me for books along the lines of this? I don't want to call it self-help, but maybe just growth and learning. If you have recommendations for books that I should check out, leave them in the description box, not the description box, the comments down below. And maybe I can read some of the books that you're recommending and let you know what I think of those. And if you just want to leave me an emoji to let me know that you're here. What's a good emoji for self-growth and improvement? Leave me a flower emoji, because we grow from a seed to a plant to a flower. So cheesy, I know. But leave me any kind of flower emoji. And until next time, make sure that you continue to read good books, drink good coffee, take care of yourselves and each other. Bye.